Chapter 23. Mud woke stiff and cold the next morning. They ate a hurried breakfast and set out again without speaking much. Hera led him through the dense underbrush and tall pine trees. Mud shivered in the shadows. A squirrel eyed him from the branch above, then darted into its hole. A flock of birds took flight screaming. A sour taste lingered on Mud's tongue. Pine needles snapped beneath his boots. After hiking for a while, they came out of the trees and into a narrow meadow where mountain bluebells and delicate asters rustled in long grass. Except for the wind blowing through the flowers, a deep silence hung over the valley. Although the sun shone overhead, a dark worry tugged at Mud's consciousness. He tensed. Hera frowned. "I don't like the look of this." She hovered among the trees, reluctant to step into the open. "What's the matter?" Drake Cutter asked. "I don't see anything out there except those flowers." "Exactly," Hera said. "The forest animals have gone silent, and a meadow like that should be buzzing with hummingbirds and butterflies." Mud glanced up at the sky. "Maybe the dragon's close by?" "Could be, but I don't feel it," Hera said. "I think we should stay out of the meadow anyway." She led him through the edge of it, staying beneath the tall pine trees that covered the slopes. Here and there, thick patches of snow still clung to the dark places that never saw sunlight. Freezing water seeped down from the snow, leaving the ground muddy. Though Mud and the others had come off the pass, the air was still thin and cold. Mud rubbed his hand against a tree, and sticky pine gum clung to his fingers. He tried to wipe it off on his trousers, but only succeeded in spreading it around. His mind strayed to the time he traveled with Hector, and his hand went to the puzzle in his pocket. Hector could have thought of some invention for getting the pine gum off. "Mud," Hera whispered, surprising. He turned to look back and realized he'd gotten ahead of the others. They stood around Hera, who knelt beside a patch of muddy ground created by a tall snowbank that huddled against the curve of the mountain. "What is it?" he asked, taking a step back toward him. "Shh," Hera hissed. "I saved large wolf tracks. It's that wolves don't walk on 2 feet." The guttural roar interrupted Hera's speculation. 5 hairy creatures that looked like a cross between hyenas and men leaped from behind the snowbank. They wore ragged chain armor and had been haphazardly pieced together. Each carried a large shield and a wicked axe, with blades that topped both ends of the haft. "Gnolls!" Hera cried. Mud swore and reached for his bow. The gnolls charged at Hera and the others, their clawed feet kicking up the snow as they raced across it. Hera whipped out her knives, Karak drew his swords, and Drake Cutter set his stance with his axe clutched in his hands. Iridan yelped in fear and raced past Mud out into the meadow. Mud snorted in amusement at Iridan and shot an arrow at the gnoll that led the attack. The arrow pinged off its shield. Before Mud could loose another shot, a great wave fell on him, driving him to his knees. A gnoll had leaped from a tree branch above to land on him. The stench of wet fur gagged Mud as the gnoll buried its sharp teeth in his shoulder. Mud screamed, thrashing to get his hand free and pull his dagger out of the sheath. The creature clung to Mud's back, keeping him pressed against the ground, so he couldn't get a clear strike at it. Mud stabbed awkwardly over his shoulder at the gnoll's face. His dagger sunk into its eye. The gnoll unclamped its jaws from Mud's shoulder with bellow and outrage. Mud twisted out from beneath it and drew his sword just in time to block the creature's wild axe swing. Metal clanged against metal as the 2 weapons met in the air. The impact drove Mud back to his knees. Behind him, Drake Cutter screamed a battle cry, and the thunk of an axe tearing through thread filled the air. The gnoll Mud fought shoved his shield in Mud's face. Mud twisted away and swung his sword at the gnoll's neck. The gnoll blocked the same time and jabbed the bottom end of its weapon at Mud's stomach. Mud danced back and swung again. His sword clanked off the gnoll's armor, the vibration of the impact shivering Mud's hand. A glimpse of the rest of the battle showed that Drake Cutter had felled 1 gnoll and was close to finishing off a second, while Hera fought 2 others. Her blade swished in silver streaks, blocking, jabbing, spinning. Karak stabbed the gnoll he fought through the chest, and it thumped to the ground at his feet. He leaped at the gnolls, attacking Hera. The gnoll Mud fought swung its axe, and Mud ducked. The sharp blade sang past his ear. Mud's sword hilt grew slick with blood that trickled down from the bite on his shoulder. He blocked blow after blow, but because of the bite, didn't have the strength in his arm to strike the knoll very hard. "Look out! There's 3 more!" Hera cried. "I got 'em!" both Korak and Drakecutter said at the same time. Mud couldn't spare the effort to look over his shoulder and make sure his friends were all right still. The only things keeping him alive were concentration and agility. He tripped over his fallen bow and tumbled to his knees. The knoll sprang forward, swinging its axe at Mud. Mud rolled away and got back to his feet. Block, strike, dodge. His shoulder thawed. The creature squinted at him with one bloody eye, the other flaming yellow. Saliva dripped from its sharp teeth. "Ha! I got one!" Hera yelled. Another raced at her. She backed up against a tree near where Mud was fighting, drawing Mud's attention. Her knives flashed against the knoll's axe strokes, cutting at its exposed lowered arm and wrist. She hooked one of her blades up behind its shield and cut off its hand. It dropped the shield with a feral scream. A fiery pain crossed Mud's sword arm. He missed a dodge while watching Hera. His hand went limp and his sword fell to the ground. The knoll's axe swung again. Mud twisted away, but the axe cut across his stomach as he tried to distance himself from his attacker. Mud cried out and gripped his dagger in his good hand. The knoll snarled and lunged at him, the fire of victory gleaming in its eyes. Mud stepped to the side and slid in beneath the knoll's arm, stabbing its dagger into the knoll's neck. For a moment he thought it wouldn't pierce the knoll's tough skin. Screaming, he put all of his weight into it. It worked. The knoll gave a gurgling cry and fell. Mud fell with it, tangled up between the knoll's shield and arms. He thrashed away from the fallen knoll and leaped to his feet, his hand pressed against the wound in his stomach. Hera still battled her knoll, but it was sluggish from loss of blood. Its blows were wild, and Hera dodged them with a grim smile. Mud's vision swam, and he fell to his knees. Korak wielded his heavy swords with grim determination. 2 knolls lay at his feet, and a third looked ready to join them. Drakecutter dropped his knoll with a final swing of his axe. A faint rustle above Hera in the tree caught Mud's attention. He looked up to see a knoll leap from the branches toward his sister. Just at that moment that she buried her knives in the knoll's chest. "Hera!" Mud cried. But even as he yelled, he knew his warning was to be late. Korak turned and pointed at Hera's attacker. The knoll stopped in midair, its feet barely off the branch. No, stop wasn't the right word. It was still falling toward Hera, but slowly, like a feather adrift on the wind. Hera tore her knives free from the knoll in front of her, and waited while the confused knoll above her floated in range. Whoosh, whoosh, her knife struck, killing the knoll. It drifted to the ground and lay softly at her feet. Korak raced over to her. The rest of the knolls had fallen. 3 killed by Korak, 3 by Drakecutter, and 3 by Hera. Mud looked at the one sorry knoll he'd killed. Black specks swam across his vision. "I'd rather pick a lock any day," he muttered before collapsing.